This is Geek Gab with your hosts, Dorrinal and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Monday, December 16th, 2024. We are rocketing towards the end of the year, folks, towards New Year's for 2025. Living in the future. As proven by the iPad, the iPhone, and Elon Musk's star, whatever, I can't remember the name now, launching rockets at the speed of a machine gun into space. Today we're going to be talking about AD&D. We're going to be talking about browser. We've got a couple of reviews lined up. And plus whatever else happens to come up in the course of the conversation. We got a special guest on the program today, the only member of the Bro SR who wasn't quivering in their boots at the very thought of coming on the show today. Fluid the Druid coming on the show to talk about Bronsteins and related events and so forth. So we have a really unusual review today. My fellow host, Dorrinal, wanted to review the main event.
Oh, man. I'll tell you what. Well, first, I just want to say, if you guys were hoping that we would do our traditional countdown of the top 100 AI-generated songs of 2024, we've decided to go ahead and discontinue that year-end special on the Geek Gab. Yes, I decided to indulge in a little bit of television.
While we're talking about music, I just discovered a new song I quite like.
A new song, you say?
Well, it's new to me. It's called Pumped Up Kicks.
At this point, that's a venerable classic. You're just hearing it now.
Just hearing it now for the first time. Somebody linked to a different song on Twitter, or somebody mentioned it on Twitter, it being controversial of late, but that they still liked it. And I'm like, Pumped Up Kicks. Oh, why is that controversial? And then I opened up the video on a tab in my machine that is still groaning under the weight of, like, literally, not joking, 300 tabs in one window. Not an exaggeration. And then it sat there unlistened to for a couple of weeks. Finally, I listened to it. I'm like, oh, this is a really pleasant song. This is a great song. A really friendly, upbeat, cheerful song. I might as well get it off of Apple Music because I pay a subscription fee every month to get all the music I want. So I went and downloaded it off of Apple Music, and I listened to this jaunty little melody about, pumped up kicks and guys in high school. And then I listened to the lyrics for the first time, and I'm like, wow. This is pretty demented. And then, for those of you that don't know, like me, who haven't heard the song, the lyrics go something like, all those kids with their pumped up kicks better run, faster than my gun. All those kids with the pumped up kicks better run, faster than my bullets. So...
But it's still a fun
upbeat. Yeah, it's still a fun upbeat song. So it's in in my iTunes now, and I'm listening to it. So I have no idea what the story behind the song is. I don't really want to know. I have no idea what the story behind why it's controversial recently is. Don't really want to know. I just like the song.
Yeah, well, welcome to 2005. Glad you could join us.
That is a while ago.
It is a catchy tune.
Oh, by the way, Olivia D. Rodrigo has a couple of has one great song and one pretty good song. They're off of her Sour album. The great song is Deja Vu. It's fantastic. And the good song is Good For You. It's pretty good. And I just ran into one of those today and the other one several months ago. So,
all right.
I love music. Love music. And occasionally we talk about it on the Gab. But you were talking about the TV.
Yeah, talking about a blast from the past. The the WWE brought back Saturday Night Main Event. I think the last show was sometime in like 20 years ago. And so they put some wrestling, free on TV Saturday nights. It's sort of an unusual time slot, and but I caught wind of it, and I thought, why not? I've been meaning to watch a little bit of wrestling, and coming from the great heights of the Attitude Era when everybody was into it, it was interesting to find out if they could, recreate that magic for me. And I tell you what, I jumped in near the beginning of. I was late to the broadcast. I turned in near the beginning of a triple threat match, and it was this really big tall guy named Damian Priest, and this other big tall Austrian guy named Gunther, and a one of those little high flyer guys whose name I didn't catch because I don't care. But I don't know these guys, and I don't care, and I missed all the interviews, and I've no idea what the storyline is. But I tell you what, they put on a really entertaining show. They had me sort of at the edge of my seat, cheering for every time one of the wrestlers' fortunes was reversed. It was exciting, and though I wasn't invested in the result of the match, they put on a really good show. And and then there was a women's match, which was perfect timing because I went to the kitchen and got dinner and ate that while that was going on. And when I came back to the show, it was the main event, and we had these two big superstars, Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens, and there's a lot of bad blood between them. Kevin Owens is a bad man, and he wants to get revenge on Cody for something. I don't know. And this time, this main event, unlike the other one, was full of emotion and drama, sort of behind the scenes. And once again, they put on a really good show. That drama played out in the if you've heard it called it's a soap opera for men, right? That's what it is. I can tell you, I don't know if wrestling's always this good, but these guys are putting on a show as good as the stuff we used to watch when we were younger, back when Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin and everybody were taking over the world. So that was a pleasant surprise. And shout out to B-Dubs, wherever he is. You know why most of the Brosar couldn't actually make the show today is because they're watching Monday Night Raw, which is going to be coming in on Netflix. They're moving from cable TV to Netflix in January.
I get the feeling that you want me to somehow excuse their cowardice based on that. Am I right?
I mean, it was either that or give you a free shot at them. Well done. Yeah, so that was really that was way more exciting than I expected, than it had any right to be. So I actually highly recommend what they're putting out. Another thing that I want to share with you guys, because do you guys like watching Christmas movies? I know we do lots of Halloween movies around here, but do you guys switch over to Christmas movies at all?
Oh yeah.
I do like Christmas movies. I don't I haven't watched a lot of movies as much as I would like um, recently, but I do like Christmas movies.
How do you feel about Dwayne the Rock Johnson? hate to hate to bias your opinion there with that. Nope, dead air. That's how we feel about Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Well,
I know nothing. I know
He's
nothing.
made some good movies and he's made some really bad movies.
Yes, you're being kind. He almost universally makes bad movies. And
Well, I liked him in the Fast and the Furious movies, and then he did a spin-off of them.
Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah, I liked Hobbs and Shaw. I thought it was fun.
That one was fun, and he was amazing in Pain and Gain, the Michael Bay.
Oh yeah,
film. Perfectly cast there.
What else have I seen in him that I liked? He was awful in Dune. That was such a terrible movie. You don't even remember that movie, do you?
I did not watch it. That was one I knew enough to skip.
I've seen both Doom movies. I've watched both of those. And some of them had some really cool ideas and stuff. The script was terrible. Just terrible. What else?
So, we're gonna combine Dwayne the Rock Johnson with Christmas movies, which you actually love. And so I saw Red One, a Christmas movie starring Dwayne the Rock Johnson, in what should have been a straight to TV movie. I am not going to say it's good, and I can't recommend it. Well, I wouldn't recommend it for the theater, but it's free on streaming on. Is it HBO Max? It might be Max. It might be something else.
But it's already available on streaming right now.
Oh yeah, it should have been a straight to streaming movie because it did nothing in the box office and is now available for streaming.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh like that.
Movies bomb all the time. It's a bomb, but it is a lot better than it looks, or than the numbers would tell you. Yes, I'm damning it. I'm damning it with faint praise. Here's the deal: it's not a good movie, but there's a entertaining story, your typical Christmas fare about redemption, where a deadbeat dad played by Chris Evans needs to find the Christmas spirit, and Chris Evans is terrible. So this is the things that you would expect to be bad. Chris Evans can't act. The Rock is not a great actor. And the poor Rock is put in a totally thankless role because, yes, the movie's about rescuing Santa Claus, also known as Red One, by Dwayne The Rock Johnson. But the character doesn't have anything interesting to do other than be The Rock. Like his role in the film is to be super strong, super tough, and help save Santa. Whereas the real main character is Chris Evans' slimy con man / investigator whose specialty is to find missing people. So, first he's responsible for Santa Claus getting kidnapped, and then he's responsible for finding out where the kidnappers took him. And but the parts that and one part that you expect to be absolutely terrible is fast-paced, computer-animated fight scenes and characters, right? They're a little smarter with this because there's an exciting scene, a chase scene, the kidnap scene that makes the North Pole look somehow like a Arctic cyberpunk dystopia. I thought I was watching a Blade Runner knockoff for a few minutes. And they've got this really cool animated polar bear soldier bodyguard who they wisely use very sparingly. Because who wants to watch that? But other stuff was good. And the story, go ahead. Question?
Does he drink a bottle of Coke at any time during the movie?
I'm afraid not.
That's a missed opportunity.
Absolutely. Huge missed opportunity.
Just for the gag.
Let's see. So the things that surprised me, the story with the dad was okay. And there's a great scene in the middle of the movie where they encounter Krampus at his, winter castle where it's dark and there's dungeons and there's all sorts of evil monsters and spirits there. And most of that work is done with makeup, and it's a guy in a mask with people wearing ghoulish makeup like it's a Halloween movie or something like that. So amongst all the computer generated stuff, it was refreshing to see that scene. I actually sat up in my seat and put my glasses on and actually fully paid attention to the movie when it got there, because I was shocked at actually seeing some craftsmanship put in.
So it's not a lazily made film. It's not something that they just slapped together and threw out there. They actually put some effort in.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because it's a shame that it appears the actors phone it in, particularly The Rock, Captain America, and Lucy Liu plays a completely pointless character in it. And so her plastic chopped up face is on the screen a bunch, and you wonder why this character's in the film and when are they going to get to the next scene, right? It's a shame, and the material's not great, but you know what? Everything they did served the story. They had they had those interesting costumes in those one scene. I wish they had done a little bit less with computer stuff, but what are you going to do? The settings hackneyed, right? It's another one of those, Santa Claus is a superhuman with a business, and and sure, my wife would say, it's kind of interesting to see other people's visions of what the North Pole might be. And, I can't disagree with that. That's kind of cool. If you look at it that way, like, oh, each movie sort of has the same plot, but you get to see what their take on Santa Claus might be. I also will note, if you're thinking of doing this as like a kids movie, I didn't even look up what the rating was, but the language is really foul, particularly in the beginning of the movie. And they sort of let up on it after the first act, but still, it was a little jarring to hear a bunch of foul language in a movie like this. And that's way too much time to talk about that film. That's how I feel about it.
So it's unfortunate. I mean, if you're going to make a Christmas movie, you might as well at least try to throw something out there that's going to be family friendly.
Yeah, it was really jarring. Why isn't this family friendly? Like, all the action scenes were PG or PG-13, and the characters and the situations, they're all perfectly, you would take a tween or an adolescent to that, but to make them hear I'll save the show. I don't need to swear right now. It just I think they avoided an R rating because there's no F-bombs in it, right? But still, really strange choice on the script. But it is what it is, and it is. I haven't looked this up, but it's probably losing a ton of money.
That's too bad. I mean, it sounds like they had something. You can do completely ridiculous things that nonetheless turn out to be a passable movie. I don't
Sorry to interrupt. Simon's got us. PG-13.
I don't like Will Ferrell very much, and I really don't like Elf because I think it's something that apes Rankin Bass movies but doesn't really have the spirit of it. I think it's someone who likes the form of Rankin Bass movies but doesn't really understand Christmas. I think it's kind of a hollow imitation. I mean, this person really does love the Rankin Bass Christmas movies, but they can't make one. So they were reduced to making something that's just a hollow imitation. But at the same time, at least it's a sincere movie that anybody in the family can watch and not be offended by, and you wouldn't hesitate to show it to your kids, and it's harmless. It's not as good as what it's trying to emulate, what it's trying to pay homage to, but it's at least harmless, and it's trying to put out a good message, or deal with positive themes and stuff. And it sounds like this movie could have been something like that with a little bit edgier tone, kind of aimed at a teen market, but they just went way too far.
Yeah, and you're right. And it felt by the end, especially with the final act and the final rescue of Santa Claus, it actually felt like a Marvel movie, and not a good one.
So, like a Marvel movie.
Yes. Got him.
I just had to get that dig in there.
They own
all
it.
Right. I just wanted to talk about something I've been thinking about. Oh, I'm sorry. Speaking of abrupt transitions, I just wanted to talk about something that I saw online on Twitter that's been going on. I've seen it sporadically over the last couple of years. It's one of these small time, like mini controversies. So we're not talking about, magical wheelchairs. We're not talking about ramps, handicap ramps in the dungeon. We're not talking about Mexican orcs. We're not talking about, gay dwarves or anything else. What I want to talk about is this argument between basic D&D players and AD&D players on rolling the dice for their character attributes. So it goes like this. D&D players say they are hardcore players. They are the real players of D&D because they roll 3 freaking D6 in a row and they take those numbers. Whereas in reference to AD&D, Gary Gygax said a player character has to have at least 115 or he's not playable. And AD&D players have 4 different methods for rolling the dice, none of them being 3d6 in a row, take it what you got. And so AD&D players are weak. They're weak, they're wimpy, because they inflate their stat numbers. Now, here's the thing. And I'm kind of sitting in the middle of these two, watching it go back and forth. And for a long time, I just didn't care. Because it's like, whatever. But last week, and this is why we're talking about it this week, I was thinking to myself, and I said, self, for some reason I was pondering this issue. It just kind of bubbled up from my unconscious. And I said, self, I'm recalling basic D&D, the BECMI rules, basic, expert, companion, master, immortal rules that later got rolled into the rules cyclopedia. And I thought to myself, aren't the bonuses you get from those attributes much more generous? Don't they start at a lower level? That is, you can have lower attributes in Rules Cyclopedia D&D and get big bonuses. Whereas in AD&D, you have to have higher attributes to get the same bonuses. So doesn't that mean that D&D players can roll straight 3d6 because their mechanics are more forgiving? And AD&D players can need more forgiving attribute rolling methods because their mechanics are less forgiving. And doesn't that make it kind of 6 of one and half dozen of the others? That neither, just speaking not of the game system as a whole, as a game system as a whole, I prefer AD&D. I prefer the armor class starts at 10, not 9. Of course, I prefer armor class that starts in 10 and goes up, as clearly God intended. That aside.
Fighting words. But go on.
That aside, noticing the differences between the two on it, they're pretty equivalent in terms of who's the real Iron Man as far as rolling dice. You're not more superior for playing D&D basic and rolling 3d6, or more superior for playing AD&D and rolling, however many dice you are, depending on which method you're using. They all come out the same in the end. So I did not want to just let my opinion carry the day. So I have before me on my computer PDFs of the AD&D Player's Handbook and PDFs of the Rules Cyclopedia. And they're both turned to the attribute tables. So I'm going to compare strength. Bonus and penalties for ability scores in the Rules Cyclopedia. 9 to 12, no adjustment. 13 to 15, plus 1. 16 to 17, plus 2. 18 is plus 3. For strength, that adds to hit and to damage. So, a D&D character can have a 13 and get plus 1 to hit and plus 1 to damage. Whereas an AD&D character has to have a strength of 17 to get a plus 1 to hit and plus 1 to damage, and has to have a strength of 16 to get any bonus at all, and they only get plus 1 to damage. So a D&D character who has a 16 has plus 2 to hit and plus 2 to damage. In order to get plus 2 to hit, you have to have an 1851 in AD&D, which means not only did you have to roll an 18, but you have to be a fighter and you have to roll a 51 or above on the percentile dice. So this is much, much, much more lenient for the player characters in D&D than for AD&D. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that makes it a bad game or makes it you're a bad person for playing it. I'm just saying there is a big difference. And to completely confuse the issue, if you want to go to 3rd edition of D&D, the modifier for strength starts off at +1 on a 12 to 13 and goes all the way up to +4 on an 18 to 19. In D&D, your strength caps out at 18, which is a +3 bonus. In AD&D, at 1800, you get a +3 to hit and +6 to damage. So your damage bonus keeps on going up, but your strength goes on. But your 2 hits caps out at +3. But in 3rd edition, you have a +4 to hit, +4 to damage, add an 18, and there's no percentile rolls. So a little bit better to hit, a little bit worse to damage, better than D&D at pretty much every level. So again, on just one more of the quick comparisons I was able to do before the show started, you get a lot more languages though in AD&D, like a ton more languages in AD&D for having a high intelligence than you get in D&D. D&D characters just do not get good amounts of languages. And in AD&D, you max out at +4 hit points at 18 if you're a fighter, +2 hit points if you're anybody else. But in D&D, you get +3 hit points for everybody at an 18. So AD&D is a little bit more lenient if you're a fighter, but less for everybody else. Even so, you can see how higher ability scores, AD&D, if your Constitution is less than a 14 or 14 or less, you get nothing. Whereas, again, in D&D, you get a bonus to your hit points all the way down to 13. So, and in 3rd edition, you get a bonus to your hit points all the way down to 12. So, yeah, just some differences between the games, and why rolling attributes in one is their dice methods are commensurate with the levels that you need to get bonuses. In fact, it's kind of strange when you're looking at it. And I know Fluid here has done a lot more work than I have on comparing the deep intricacies of AD&D rules. But it's kind of strange to me that you have this broad gap between like about 8 to about 13 or 14, where there's very little difference in those other than prime requisites for your rarer classes and qualifying for basic classes at like a 9 or something, and for magic users and clerics, their spells, maximum level of spells they can cast. But for a lot of other things, there's just that broad gap where the attributes are pretty much there's just not a lot of difference between an 8 and a 12, or between a 7 and a 13. It's a little strange. And I'm not saying it's bad, and I'm not saying it makes the game bad. What I'm saying is I wonder why it was designed that way. And I haven't gone back and looked at OD&D. I've got the big volume that they're begging people to buy now. I bought it when it was not $100, but I got a big discount off Amazon. I don't remember if I got the $50 discount or a less discount, but I haven't gone back and looked at OD&D to see what they did with their attributes, but that would be another interesting comparison. By the way, now that I'm done with my little bit, let's introduce our guest.
Hey, Fluid, welcome on.
Hello.
Do you have any comments on that whole attributes thing?
Yeah. I have not dug deep into it like you have, though I would definitely say that for many years, I was soured on Dungeons and Dragons in general due to the gaps in distinguishing one attribute from another. Because I often would think, why do I even have a different number if it doesn't matter? Why did I roll 3 to 18 when there's only maybe 6 values that change anything within that range? I have changed my mind on that, but mostly because I've ceased to care about attributes. I kind of feel like it doesn't really matter what you roll, that you can still do okay, unless maybe you roll like all 3s or something. You can do okay with almost any character, any set of attributes. And having great attributes, yeah, it helps, but it's not the be all end all in terms of character success. But yes, I have noticed that same gap.
And you're familiar with Torg, right?
No, I've never even looked at Torg.
Oh, okay. That must have been. No, that's Bradford Walker is familiar with Torg. My bad. I need to greatly.
Torg is like The Rock with me. I've also never looked at The Rock. I can't think of a Rock movie I've seen.
In Torg, every single point of every attribute matters because every value in the game is directly calculated based on your attributes. Like all of your skills are, here's your attribute, here's the adds to the skill. So if you increase your attribute by 1 point, every single skill based on that attribute increases by 1 point immediately. And your toughness is used directly to reduce damage. So if you increase your toughness by 1 point, all the damage you take from every single source that's physical damage decreases by 1 point. Your most of your up to a certain point, which is about 10, because that's like the physical maximum humans can go. All of your running, long jumping, and so forth, all those speeds are calculated based on your dexterity. So you increase your dexterity by 1 point, all your dexterity skills go up by 1, and all your speeds go up by 1. So attributes are really, really important in that game. They're like big, critical, they impact the game pervasively and thoroughly. They are they are simply the most important measure in the game. They are the core of the game, the attributes, and then secondly, the skills. You'll notice skills more because that's what you use all the time, but attributes are the quiet thing that sits at the core of the game underneath your skills.
Oh yeah. So I just had some thoughts. That big blank area between 9 and 12, roughly. I I think that comes out of the fact that this is just my knee-jerk opinion with no basis on knowledge. I think it comes out of the fact that D&D came out of wargaming where soldiers are interchangeable units, and everybody was at base an interchangeable unit, and then they came up with ways to distinguish characters from those units. So if you're average, you're interchangeable. Also, on the rule cyclopedia version of D&D, where every attribute has the same set of adjustments based on its number, you really could rewrite that whole game with the attributes going from -3 to +3, rather than the 3 to 18. The only thing the 3 to 18 adds is change the distribution of those penalties or bonuses. But you could roll the 3 to 18 and just write down the bonuses and you'd be fine. So that's an interesting thing to me, where I often wondered, why did they just ditch the attribute and just keep the bonus? But those are my only few thoughts on that one.
They kind of almost did. Everybody sort of had the same reaction in 3rd edition and 5th edition. In the 5th edition on the character sheet, I don't even know if they put space for your ability score anymore. I think because the only thing that matters is the bonus.
Yeah. And I personally find the AD&D idiosyncrasies from one attribute to the next charming. So I just like its inconsistency that, okay, strength isn't the same as intelligence, isn't the same as dexterity. It's similar, maybe, but not exactly the same.
Yeah, you can appreciate the elegance. I like to say that when you look at systems from 3rd edition on, I like to say that a software engineer was involved somehow. Someone who likes to write computer games and things, because there's an elegance to it. There's an elegance to saying, yeah, well, I mean, for every point of strength, you get a point of strength. Whatever strength does, you're 1 point better at it. And so you go down that rabbit hole and you end up with those uniform bonuses where, having a 14 strength is +2 strengthiness. And, and I think we've all found out that makes a pen and paper game with your buddies, that's a little bland.
Yeah, and it's very useful for making universal mechanics, which are great for computer games. Though ironically, you could make very complex idiosyncratic mechanics for computer games, and we'd never know it because we don't see inside the black box. But back in the day, let's say you're programming Ultima, you probably want a universal mechanic. You only had so much memory and space. And, but yeah,
fair, for sure.
These days, I think you could program something very much akin to the weirdness of AD&D, and I guess they kind of did with Baldur's Gate, but I guess that was really 5th edition. I don't know. I don't pay any attention to that. You could, but I don't know if anybody really has. And even I didn't play them much, but in the old 2nd edition based computer games, even then they changed from the actual 2nd edition rules to some degree, didn't they?
Yeah, in some ways, the attributes, I think they did the same, but they had to make necessary changes to the game system.
Give me a sec.
The combat rules in AD&D 2nd edition are a lot more free form than a computer game allows, right? You have to make certain allowances.
Yeah, they had to get specific with the computer.
Yeah.
Which understandable. That's the only thing they can do.
It looks like, just glancing at this, I also have a PDF of the 2nd edition Player's Handbook. it looks like, just glancing at strength, all of those idiosyncrasies of first edition are intact. 16 has a +1 damage, 1800 is +3, +6. So they may have
Pretty close.
yeah, 18 Constitution is +2, +4 if you're a fighters, warriors. Intelligence, has the same number of languages. Wisdom has some neat things there. They integrated the tables from the deities and demigods books up to 25, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
So enough about attributes. I wanted to point out, if for those of you who don't know what Fluid's been up to, you keep your blog pretty quiet, but if you go to fluiddruid.blog, you're going to find some excellent scholarship on AD&D in particular. Can you
I wanted to point this out because this was absolutely so impressive to me. One of the things that he dropped in a chat I'm in is why the level limits for fighters are the way they are. Do you want to explain that to him?
Oh yeah, here, let me grab my player's handbook and open it up. So if you look in AD&D player's handbook, there are level limits for different characters and different races, and there's also footnotes for those limits. And so if you look at dwarves, they're limited to level 9. Elves are limited to level 7. Gnomes to level 6. Half-elves to level 8. Halflings to level 6. Half-orcs to 10. And humans, unlimited. We're the best. Now, it helps to go forward from that page 14 to page 18 and look at the little drawing of all the different races that are there. It doesn't have them all, but it has humans and dwarves and elves and half-orcs and half-elves and shows their heights. But in the footnotes, so you get, where is it? Halfling fighters of hare feet subrace as well, other types of subraces with a strength of under 17 are limited to 4th level. So halflings, just for example, limited to 8, but if you're a hare feet, you're limited to 4th. If you're a tall fellow of 17 strength and stouts of 18 strength can go up to 5th. So this is related to your height. The shorter you are, the more level limited you are as a race. So the dwarves are taller than the halflings and go up to level 9. Elves, level 7. That might not be entirely by height, but elves are frail. So these level limits were not based on some sort of game balance. They were based on an attempt to simulate the robustness and the reach, how far someone could, when you're a fighter, or if let's say a boxer, everybody knows that your reach as a boxer is relevant to fighting. Same in AD&D. And the humans are the tallest, notwithstanding the movies of Lord of the Rings, orcs are not giants. They're not bigger than humans. They're smaller. Half-orcs are smaller than humans. Elves are smaller than humans. Dwarves and halflings are smaller than humans, as are gnomes. And so the fighter level limits are based on height and or how robust your frame is. And it's similar for the other things. Like for cleric, there are limits, and those are based on that in the DMG there's discussion on what spells how clerical spells are given out by different aspects. So if you're low level, the low level spells are spells anyone can access. But the middle level spells are given out by the avatars of the deity in question. The highest level spells are given out by the deity themselves. And the level limits for clerics relate explicitly back to those distinctions that are given in the DMG. So basically, the gods don't like the races. The deity won't interact with, say, a dwarf or a gnome or a half-orc in the same way. Half-orcs, even the avatars of the deity, the angels, will not deal with a half-orc. And there's different explanations of it, but one common one is that all the demi-human races are without souls, and the deities know that. they're not interested in those people as much. Humans are unlimited because they have souls, and the avatars of the gods and the gods will deal with humans. Similarly, there are level limits for magic users, which I have not gotten to the bottom of. But most races aren't even allowed to have magic. Only elves and half elves and humans get magic. And half elves are more limited than elves. I haven't figured out exactly that, but basically, dwarves and halflings and gnomes are, creatures of the earth. They're not magical. They're earthy. And so, anyway, that's my take on the racial stock character table and the level limits in AD&D, that they are not about play balance. Nothing to do with it. They're about the nature of those races in relationship to each other and to the deities of the world. So, and how magic works.
Oh, that's really cool. Like, there's more to it than the more you look and read the stuff in the book, particularly the Dungeon Master's Guide, but in all the books, there's all sorts of thought put into it that you wouldn't expect.
It's much deeper game than people give it credit for. And people who call themselves game designers often superficially look at tables like that and just make an assumption that it's for play balance. And I don't think it is. It really doesn't look like it when you look at the details. It's there because they were trying to make distinctions between those races on a physical level, on a spiritual level, and on an intellectual level. And sure, a game written today might make those distinctions in a different way, but it has nothing to do with play balance.
Let me run with that for a second. I mean, when you're thinking about, when you mentioned game designers, let's say you're making a computer game or a board game, and your job is to use mechanics, and many game mechanics are well known. There's deck building, there's dice rolling, there's cards, and so on and so forth, right? So you're going to use these mechanics, and you're going to try to build an interesting game out of them where the players have to make interesting decisions, and that's crucial in a card game or a video game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the goal of Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The stated goals, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the stated goals are, first off, to gather all of the Dungeons and Dragons rules together so that people could have a consistent experience from table to table, which may go alongside having interesting mechanics and interesting decisions, but it was the consistency that mattered. The other goal was so that you could generate a specific milieu based on those fantasy works in Appendix N. That is a stated goal in the book, and that explains the phenomenon that you saw. It explains why modern game designers uh, don't come up with interesting games necessarily, because they might view the setting as separate from us, have a separate goal or a separate process from making the game, because they view the game as, we're going to make an interesting board game for people to interact with because they can have fun at the table. And um, the guys who made D&D were like, how can we make Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser come alive at the table?
Yeah, and as when it comes to board games, I've often been frustrated with Euro games in that they often divorce a theme from the mechanic. They come up with a mechanic and they slap a theme over it that doesn't necessarily, the mechanic doesn't necessarily represent anything. And I often, who want something that means something, get frustrated with that. But you don't need to have a theme. Like look at classic card games. There's no theme to poker, right? You just have the rules and you interact with the rules and the mechanic. There's no theme to hearts. You just have a mechanic and you go through it. Though these days, I think people do kind of like having a theme to a game. And if for role-playing games, I think if anything, people have, designers and companies that make games have limited the games they produce to too narrow a themes. AD&D is trying to replicate all the works of Appendix N, which is extremely broad, really. Like all kind of pulp fantasy and fantasy science fiction kind of stuff you can fit into this box. Whereas now we get, well, I don't know any new games. I'm old. But almost every game comes out now has one set setting and mechanics tailored towards that. And it can do nothing else. Now, what's that called? Freely? They've been doing a little bit different, where they've come up with a kind of standardized set of universal mechanics and then applying it to a bunch of different themes, which is interesting. I just don't like their mechanic. I find it overly simplistic and kind of, it works, but it's there's not much to investigate there.
And one of the problems you run into in something like that, if you don't make the game as complex as a Euro game, it's too easily solved. And most Euro games are pretty easily solved as well. Same thing. Someone in chat mentioned point buy systems when we were talking about attribute scores, right? As soon as you switch to a non-random way to generate ability scores, you've created a mini game, and now you have a solvable system.
Yeah.
Solve for wizard. Solve for, we're just gonna use AI from now on. In fact, AI could probably play basic D&D better than we can. Chat GPT solve this first floor dungeon, right?
Yeah, here's the optimal path through there.
Exactly.
Yay. Who cares?
Bring these characters, take these actions in this order. You have a 98% chance of success. Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, and that's kind of where it goes back to why I don't really care about attributes much anymore, which is, it's not about finding an optimal path through a dungeon. That's not why you play a role-playing game. If you can have a gimped up character, that's a chance to have many opportunities for role-playing. And that's why you're role-playing. If you could play different games if you didn't want to role-play. Though I used to, back when I was stupid, I used to like point build systems because I felt like, you could tailor things more to your liking or whatever. And I'm like, oh no, I realized You actually want something that's not to your liking. That's actually what you want as a player. You want a character that is not you, that is different from you, that has challenges different from you, and does things that you can't do or wouldn't do. So that's one of the beauties of AD&D. You roll for your attributes. You see which classes are available to you from those attributes. You may be forbidden from any class but a single class, or you might have 3 to choose from. And having those limitations is really what brings a game alive. And to me, okay, whatever my attributes are, you can make a character that you can play. That's the thing. And, like I say, we really respect Gary Gygax for making the game really well, but he's wrong. You don't need a 15. You don't. There's many things he was wrong at, but it's still a great game.
For sure. Yeah, and Bradford's echoing my comments here in the chat. Spot on. You can solve the game. It'll get boring. But if you are forced to try something a little bit new, if you have enough leeway to generate ability scores and kind of make what you want, but at the same time limit powerful or special classes like the Ranger or something like that, and you'll often get put in a position where what you wanted to play isn't exactly within reach, right? It's that perfect tension between being able to enjoy what you play and sort of stretching your boundaries and learning something new.
For sure. Like, for example, I've long coveted getting a bard in AD&D.
Yeah.
One, you got to get the stats, which is hard to get, even with the easier generation systems in AD&D. But then you have to survive, through at least 5th level of a fighter and 5th level of a thief before you can switch to bard. And so far, I've never done it. I always get killed eventually beforehand, and which goes to show, like, just having great stats, because you need great stats to be a bard, doesn't mean you're going to live. And so the challenge is there. It's like, oh, I gotta nurse this guy. I gotta keep him alive to meet this goal. And similarly, I go by the moniker Fluid, which is of my character Fluid the Druid. I'd never played a Druid before because, we were choosing classes or rolling up choose classes or using pre-generated characters. I just never had. But we rolled. That's what he was best for. I was like, oh, this guy's a Druid. I'm going to try a Druid. I've never done it. That's the fun part of the game, doing something new, something you have to figure out. And there's a lot to figure out in AD&D. And so that's why it can be played for a long period of time.
So what's been on your mind lately? I started to mention your blog earlier. You blog about AD&D and stuff.
On my mind.
Yeah, what's going on in Fluids Land?
Well, I got several little projects. One project is writing up a set of gunpowder rules for AD&D, which I posted a few things on the blog about, but I'm going to make a combined little PDF of it, and so it's all in one place and comes together so that we can do pike and shot in AD&D. I think that would be fun. I guess, but the other big thing has been Braunstein's and the intersection of Braunstein's and traditional role-playing games. And like Griff, he says, "Oh, you're not playing a Braunstein, you're playing a Blackmore," which is kind of what Bronsteins became once they invented the dungeon and they invented the party and whatnot. And, a few days ago, Harmony Ginger, is it Ginger Harmony Ginger? Ginger Harmony? I always forget.
Yeah, Harmony Ginger.
Did a stream on timekeeping, but they started talking about Bronsteins. And to me, the squaring the circle, one of the things they said was Bronsteins tend to burn out and be short. And that's, from my experience, that's true. Or you can only keep up that level of interaction for a short period of time before, one, the convergences happen and everything kind of explodes. But also, I just think the players and the DM can only keep, a referee, depending on the system, can only keep that level of energy up for a certain amount of time. And to me, I think has to be ways out there to combine one-to-one time and Bronstein in a way that keeps the timekeeping consistent, because Bronsteins have also been notoriously bad at keeping time. People are talking all over the place, and when those conversations are happening is all a little uncertain in a lot of these games. And so, but I think squaring that circle is the next task to do. I know some people think they've already done that, but at least not to my satisfaction. It hasn't been done. So that's the thing I've been thinking about quite a bit. But I think, the most important thing on my blog is really, if you love that Errol Otis illustration of the Scorpadillo, I have made AD&D statistics for the Scorpadillo for everyone to use. So that really should be introduced into everyone's game. That's probably the most important thing that's on there.
Absolutely.
You got to get the Scorpadillo going, guys. And
I don't know. I'll have to search for it, but I'm showing your
it's
your
the
blog
next
on
page.
stream.
Next page down.
Oh boy.
I think. Maybe it's the next one.
Is it?
Oh, there it is. There it is.
There
There's the Scorpadillo. Yeah, that's it. I almost love that picture. Just
what a great illustration, right in the face.
Stinger. He's biting him in the leg at the same time. Oh, I really, I got to revise it. I just realized it really should be 2 attacks.
Oh yeah.
He's hitting 2 right there.
Yep.
But in any case, the Scorpadillos, that's the key. Also, the Pineapple Dragon is also a good one to take a look at.
Yeah, you've got your observations on the rules and new things. We talked about the Gangbusters Bronstein.
Oh yeah, there's the Heat Engine model of role-playing games. I think that's worth a read. It's not the be-all and end-all, but I do think it has something for people to think about on how role-playing games work. And of course, it's expansion off of Jeffro Johnson's conception of conversion and diffusion. And it's my take on what that kind of comes down to, and things that people might try to influence both their Bronsteins and their regular games to help their games self-perpetuate. That's probably the most what's the word? Theoretical article on there. The other ones are more fun, more things that I think are useful. I'm quite proud of the mining rules for AD&D, which is just a slight expansion and some doing of the work of mining in AD&D. What else? That's about it. But really, the squaring the circle of the Bronstein and traditional role-playing game, I think, is the next step.
Yeah, like you said, there's some people who say that they've done it or they know it already. B-Dubs in particular has been going on about Total Nonstop Bronstein. In the past, when this whole process of us, rediscovering all these rules and the Broasar's ascendance, B-Dubs and Jeffro have been those guys that have sort of, they have an idea and it takes a while for others to catch on. And often that's because that they haven't found the right way to express it. So
yeah, and I think that's still ongoing, trying to come up with ways to talk about it that everyone else can understand. Also, to me, if everyone else can't understand it, you haven't talked about it. You haven't not talked about it. You haven't defined it enough for yourself to explain it to people.
It took months for us to get to the core of a Bronstein, which is, for anybody who has no idea what we're talking about, it's multiple independent actors in conflict under a fog of war.
Yep.
And that's Griff approved. Like that is what the essential nature of the is that the telos of a Bronstein?
I think so, and I think that's a really great one-liner to describe it. How that's done from table to table, or how that's expressed, I think there's a whole lot of room to explore. That nothing happens. Due to strict timekeeping, not everything happens at once. So yeah, we still have to try a lot of things yet.
So let's try and work on this. Let's chip away at this if we could, because we play AD&D in Trollopolis, and Macho Man Dolph's the DM most of the time, and we are doing a lot of dungeon delving, even with our mid-level characters, and things are rapidly heating up to a domain level game, but at the same time we haven't been able to find a way to make a Bronstein regularly happen, or to have one happen at all. So how is there a way to get from where we are to a Bronstein, or how do you make a Bronstein work in that setting?
Well, I kind of agree and disagree. I think there are Bronstein-like things happening. We just don't all know about them because a lot of them are secret. A lot of them are groups of characters discussing things on the side and coming up with plans that get carried out in downtime. For example, my character Pete.
Boo, Pete.
My character Pete is building his workhouse in the city of St. Raoul, but his money's halfway across the board at Ragnar. So he's got plans in the work to transport that money from one side of the board to the other. He doesn't necessarily want everyone to know about those plans, or other people that are playing behind the scenes to know about those plans. I don't know how that's not Bronstein. He's also hired other characters to help him with transporting it and coming up with ways to do that kind of meet other people's goals and needs. I don't know. That's not Bronstein, but you could say that's just working with one-to-one time and downtime.
Yeah, when does it shift? Where does the shift happen between what we used to call patron activity, whether in downtime or not, and an actual Bronstein? When does that change? Is it when it's done in session? Is it when there's open conflict or a Cold War or something else?
I guess I don't know the answer to that. Mostly because I don't know what is meant by total nonstop Bronstein, except which has been one of the bones of contentions. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, guys. Could you explain to me exactly what you mean? Because I think we're doing it and have been. And they're like, no. Well, maybe it has to be in session. I don't see why that does. Now, Dornall, you were in the Gangbuster Steam that I ran, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I played the Irish mobster.
Oh, right. Yes. So in that game, we had a confluence that was coming to be when we ran out of time and couldn't finish it. Um, you know, but in Gangbusters, the rules themselves don't have a lot of details on how to run a campaign. But one of the things it does describe is each character writing down their weekly orders or plan of action for the week, and then the referee looking at them all and evaluating them and trying to come up with confluences for interaction. And Gabe, in the after action report we did on Gangbuster Steam, he had the suggestion that might maybe make it more efficient is if everybody put their orders out openly and everybody could look for these confluences and actions. Now they'd still be role playing because they'd still be trying to take into account that, seeing everybody's orders would definitely give them information that their character doesn't have. So they would still have to put themselves in the shoes of their character and make their decisions based on what that character would know. That would be role playing. And but that would speed up both finding these confluences, but it would also help minimize the work that the referee needs to do. Rather than the referee trying to look at every permutation for each day, you have, 5, 6, 8 different people looking for those permutations on each day. And I don't think anybody's really tried that yet as far as how to manage a Bronstein. And that's one thing that I will be giving it a try sometime in the future. And there's definitely things that one could pick at it, right? Oh, there's secret stuff and everybody just puts it out there. Won't that influence? Well, yeah, it could influence the decisions they make in the future poorly. But maybe that's what you have a referee for. Jeffro has been quite famously, everybody who plays with him says, oh, he told me I couldn't do that. He told me I couldn't do that. Well, this would be no different, right? Except that it'd be all out in the open. Yeah, your character doesn't know that. You can't make that decision. You have to make some other decision. So that's one thing that I think could improve the efficiency of the Bronstein, though I also think it could limit the interaction from players more. So
that would definitely appeal to a player like me who, in my Bronstein so far, I have tried to limit my negotiations and do all my actions subtly through orders. I would definitely I'd be much more interested in crafting good orders than that interaction part, which is why I lose them.
Yeah, it's hard. You have to go out and try to talk with people that you don't know their character really, and you don't know what their character is up to, and do you trust them? How much do you tell them? There was a meme, was it last week or this weekend? When was it? Where it was like had the guy with the kind of shell-shocked look on his face. you aren't playing a Bronstein unless you think like this at the end, where it's like,
yes,
you think that you've given away too much, and also not interacted enough. And
exactly.
I think that's the nature of them to a certain extent. Now, one thing which I would like to hear more about the original Braunstein, which is, as I understand it, Wesley defined all these different roles within the town of Braunstein. And there's, approaching armies coming, the town might get sacked or whatever. The question is, what do you do? Now, a lot of people seem to say that these Braunstein should devolve down into player to PvP conflict, shooting each other or trying to argue about some resource. And yeah, I think that's part of it. But I think there's more to it because, I think anybody who's seen a war movie knows that the people within a town that it's about to be invaded, they're cooperating with each other as much as they're fighting with each other. There's the guys trying to build a defense. There's the guys trying to get out of town with their family and relatives. There's all sorts of things that can be happening that aren't directly, violent conflict. And so that's another thing that I think is just as far as the broad range of things that can be explored within a Braunstein. I think, one should be able to build things as much as knock things down in the Braunstein. And I don't know if we've really explored that too much.
Yeah, the builders are could also be accused of, rightfully so, in many cases, of turtling.
For sure. For
yeah.
sure.
I not only do I want to build something to add to the world, but also builders tend to favor the late game in any game that they're playing, right? Yes,
Yeah.
I want to build my game state. I want my board or tableau to be unbeatable by the time the clock runs out.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, you could be accused of turtling, and they may be right. But I don't know. I guess I have a hard time with saying no, you can't do that versus, well, you're going to lose the Braunstein when you might. It's like, but when we did the Braunstein in Trollopolis, which was all about different merchant caravans moving through from these mountain village to mountain village. I think I had some success partly because I decided to throw a festival to sell my goods at one of the towns. And what happened there was that I got to sell some goods and make some money. And the other merchant caravans kept moving across the map to where the bandits were and gotten robbed and destroyed. Whereas I was like there selling goods at the village and having raffles. So I think there's some would say that was turtling, some would say that was fun. And another within the range of choices that a merchant might do. So I don't know. I guess to me, I think that there are that the space is really broad. There's all sorts of different sets of factions and
so there's more to a
approaches.
Braunstein. Not to put words in your mouth, but there's more to a Braunstein than the aggressive action that has been favored so far by the winners of the Braunsteins.
Yeah, I would say so. Now that might be an unfair characterization, but I think to some extent it's true. I think if you look at these Braunsteins as a whole, and the other thing with role-playing games, if your character dies, you can roll up another one and just keep playing, generally speaking. In a Braunstein, particularly if you're doing a Braunstein as an event, like a one session sort of thing, you get killed early, you're out. That's fine. There isn't time to roll up another character or figure out where he fits in. But on the other hand, I don't necessarily think that has to be the only way one could do it. That there may be a way to come up with ways of reintroducing players who have been, lost essentially back into the game during session. That could mean that you define more factions than you're going to use. And I think, the browser document that we came up with, it has probably more factions than will ever be used at one time on a table. How many do they have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 major factions and 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 minor factions. Probably never going to. No one's probably ever going to run a browser where every one of those factions is used. And I think that's a good thing in the document, where if somebody got eliminated, you could throw them a bone and give them one of the other factions that's left. Introduce a new faction in at the time. I don't know if anybody's ever done that.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That'd be a great idea, though.
But you'd have to have the factions available, because despite factions being relatively easy to create, right in the middle of the game, they're not relatively that easy to create. And so I guess one thing is, like, the Browser came out with the browser document, which was, I think, B-Dub's idea, and a good one. And, I don't have much to say about it, except I made one of the factions in it. And
was that your only role in making it?
Yep. I made one of the factions, a minor faction at that, which was the Pilgrims of the Holy Destruction, which were a set of pilgrims coming to the island to destroy an artifact that they felt they needed to get rid of. Now, that faction, the Pilgrims of the Holy Destruction, is just a monster manual, men, pilgrims, randomly rolled numbers of pilgrims and their guards and the people within their right. It's exactly that. It was just straight from the monster manual. Doesn't take long to do. And yes, there are a few things I added to it using my imagination that makes it a more unique than just that straight out of the monster manual. But it just goes to show that the monster manual in AD&D, particularly for things like the humanoid races, the human factions, and demi-human factions, they're all presented as if you're going to generate like a large group of them or a little village. And I think that's brilliant. It gives you a tool right off the bat, right out of the book, to just create essentially a Braunstein faction right there.
Once again, the purpose of the rules is to generate that setting, that milieu, not necessarily for an interesting, a satisfying board gaming experience. It's because what your imagination does when you hear 250 goblins. Great. Crap, what do I do about that? And for the Braunstein, I need a new faction. Boom, here's an army.
Right there. And yeah, it's quite simple. And that's what you want. AD&D's often presented as a complex game, and it is. If you're trying to figure out the order of operations in initiative and weapon speed and spellcasting, who goes first, it gets complicated. But really, it has probably more than any other role-playing game, AD&D First Edition has more tools available to make things simple for you than not. And people overlook them. They're the Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C. Those three. And really, if you look at it, what is it? Appendix 3 and Deities and Demigods, too. I view that Appendix 3 as essential if you're playing clerics. And so AD&D doesn't get enough credit for making things simple for you.
Well said. And that's I love how everything we did has led back to the Bronsteins. I mean, it makes sense because we're working backwards.
Mhm.
But everything that you see in AD&D is put in context, and the context that we got has allowed us to learn more and find more of these interesting decisions and interesting games within the rules. I'm gushing about AD&D. We are well over time. This is unusual, probably because we have such an unusually handsome and knowledgeable guest. But we should save the rest for another day. Uh, Warpig first. I'm out of questions. Unless you guys want to talk about Cyberpunk, I think I'm done talking about Bronstein's. Warpig, do you have anything else you want to go over?
No, I am. Folks, I didn't say this at the beginning of the show, but we had a very, very quick deadline for the show. I just popped into the chat. We're both part of it. I said, hey, anybody want to come on the show? So literally an hour before we launched, I said that, and Fluid agreed to come on the show. So he didn't have any warning. He didn't have any time to, get books or stay up on anything. This is all off the top of his head. So I really, really want to thank him for coming on the show tonight. And I also want to thank him for all the work he's done on studying the basics of the AD&D system and studying the basics of why it works the way it does. And I had a couple of insights myself that I was really proud of. But Fluid has gone way deeper in depth and far beyond me in breadth in learning why the system works the way that it does. And it really is amazing when you find out that all of these things are based on concrete decisions of verisimilitude that weren't directly communicated to players, but are there making things, they're making things make sense in the game. Very, very short halflings, they can't get beyond level 4 fighters, so they're just not very good at fighting. And that has an effect on the game in subtle ways, but that's there for a reason. And it's just kind of implicitly there in the background. And the way that AD&D is set up without any explanation for a lot of these things, it all operates just there in the background. So again, I want to thank Fluid for coming on and talking about how and why AD&D operates and talking about the all the other topics we covered today off the top of his head and without warning. Do you have any last thoughts there, Fluid, before we go?
Not really. I did have a Christmas song I would like to suggest. Go check out the band Fishbone. They have a song called Slick Nick UW, which is a humorous, if somewhat dark, Christmas song. And also, as far as Christmas movies, which you brought up earlier, The Year Without a Santa Claus, that's the best one ever. I love Heat Miser and Cold Miser, and just the fact that those characters were just thrown in randomly along with what's the other one? Mother Nature, and it still all works. What a fun movie.
Very strange, very fun.
But anyway, thank you very much. It was very fun to chat, and we'll probably do some more again.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back on. All right, folks. Want to thank everyone who tuned in and listened live. We want to thank everyone who's going to listen later. This is Geek Gab for Monday, December 16th, 2024. We're here just about every Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. YouTube.com/GeekGab. Once again, that's YouTube.com/GeekGab. You can catch us on the Google Play Store, the iTunes Store, and on SoundCloud.com. Download us to the device of your choice. Listen to us on the web or on your PC. Be sure to subscribe, click the bell icon, and click like if you like the show, so you can get notice as to when we are going live. We are signing out for today, folks, but don't you worry, don't you fret. We will be back.